just looking at the flow here this morning, I mean, that's the meteorological equivalent to game on. I mean, the flow's coming up. Eric and I were driving across different parts of the central U.S. yesterday evening, like states away from each other. And we were both remarking how foggy it was on our drives. And so you just have that moisture streaming up. You can draw the trajectories of this air mass back through the Gulf, back through the Caribbean, into the deep tropical Atlantic here. As a result, the all hazards map as of this morning, dense fog advisories from Oklahoma, Kansas, up through the northern plains, the upper Midwest, along that I-80 corridor, stretching over to D.C., the Atlantic coast, the Gulf Coast, and then further west. I love when you can kind of make out that high-level pattern based on what advisories the National Weather Service has issued. So you can kind of see the trough here situated over the four corners, the high wind warnings, especially for the mountains, right? Because these upper-level troughs, they're just kind of vigorous cold air in the upper levels, and so that's helping to produce that snow. The Rockies, more wind, red flag warnings, fire risk off the Front Range. You can see that trough coming in, which is the impetus for the severe weather that we need to track potentially today and tomorrow as well. Yesterday saw more precipitation, thunderstorms over that kind of Ohio River Valley area, southern Illinois, Indiana, southern Ohio through Missouri. This is an area that had been waiting on some rainfall, certainly back through Oklahoma. Saw some severe reports as well, a few severe thunderstorm warnings and tornado warnings as well. I don't see any tornado reports on this map as of yet here, just analyzing the reports yesterday, but plenty of hail. I mean, through that same quarter, the SPC had highlighted for slight risk, and you can see the storm reports kind of speckled in there. If we look this morning at the current radar, again, the Ohio River Valley, that's been the kind of focus for a lot of this heavier precipitation Eric was showing you. That kind of little quarter there on I-70 was where we were really seeing some of the strongest rainfall amounts, particularly over here near the border of like Indiana and Ohio. Saw some reports of higher amounts now getting up to like 6 inches in 48 hours. That's enough to start causing some of those flooding issues that we were worried about. Now, I'm going to jump back for a second, show you that flow out of the south again. Keep an eye on the high plains here. We're starting to kind of split the flow a little bit. You have one kind of trajectory here heading into the Ohio River Valley. That's prompting that rainfall that you just saw, but we're starting to push some moisture back up into the western high plains. And that could get a little bit interesting later today, and the Storm Prediction Center's keeping an eye on that too, coming out with an enhanced risk for severe weather, western Oklahoma and the Texas Panhandle. Now, that's not uncommon this time of year. In fact, if I jump over, I'm going to pick on the HRRR here, the high resolution forecast. Let's go down south central, get a closer look at it. Taking this forecast out from the HRRR model all the way into this evening, like between 5 and 7 p.m. central. It's isolated, but that's pretty robust supercell development, at least from the HRRR, maybe transitioning more into a wind threat before screaming across northern Oklahoma overnight, for potentially weakening up to eastern Kansas. And so, again, more localized supercell development there. That's probably why the Storm Prediction Center going with that smaller enhanced risk area. That's a pretty potent signal from the HRRR. So that's an area we're going to be watching tonight. Now, tomorrow, that threat shifts east. That trough that's currently positioned over the four corners, by tomorrow, it's going to migrate to about here. And tomorrow evening, as a result, we're watching more so near eastern Kansas, western Missouri, eastern Oklahoma, that area highlighted by the Storm Prediction Center for tomorrow, with that enhanced risk for severe weather. And this is a wide slight risk. It stretches all the way from the Chicago metro area down through Dallas, Fort Worth, over toward Des Moines, southeastern Nebraska, cutting through Omaha there. So this is a widespread, potentially thunderstorm setup. Now, the magnitude of how much severe weather is going to come out of it, outside of just rumbles of thunder and rain that we're looking for, is kind of still in question for me. I'm struggling to see a lot of moisture get pulled up, the kind that we look for big severe thunderstorm development. So we certainly have plenty of moisture. I talked about the fog. We're seeing a lot of rainfall, but you need quite a bit of low-level moisture, juxtaposed with cold air, drier air aloft. And if I look at CAPE, which is a measure of that instability in the atmosphere, I'm just looking at the NAM because it's going to take us out through tomorrow, and it's got the nice high resolution. We get up to 1,000, 2,000 CAPE here in western Oklahoma, the Texas Panhandle. In fact, kind of that maximum there, right over that enhanced risk area. You can see why the SPC has highlighted that area. 2,000 CAPE is more than sufficient for kind of all your hazards, hail, wind, tornadoes. But I'm going to take this into tomorrow, and you're going to see that trough start to push that front further to the east overnight. When we go into tomorrow, I'm kind of watching this area here. You're up over 1,000. We kind of usually think like, once you're over 750, 1,000 CAPE, you're sufficient for some severe thunderstorms, but for a really big outbreak kind of stretching all the way across this region, I would think we're going to want to pump that up, to 2,000 if you're a severe thunderstorm. Now, I'm not rooting for anything like that, but just from the perspective of, what you're typically looking for a typical severe outbreak, maybe be a little bit higher than that. We're going to have severe reports today. We're going to have some tomorrow. I would be shocked if otherwise, but the ceiling of the event tomorrow is in question right now for me. Certainly could deliver if we get a little bit more moisture overnight. The thing is, you bump those dew points up, 1 or 2, those Cape values start to increase pretty quickly here. So we need to nail that moisture return forecast to figure out how significant I think that severe event's going to be tomorrow. The day after that, that trough shifts further to the east, and the severe threat goes along with it. Eastern Corn Belt, out to the Gulf Coast of Texas, Houston, going to be watching more so hail and wind, I think, as this transitions into Saturday. And then after that, seeing this lull in the weekend pattern. So I'm showing you the ECMWF precipitation here. Let's take it through this evening. I always, the ECMWF model is in high resolution. It's not going to resolve those individual supercells like the HER does, but it can do a good job telling you, is it going to initiate? Is this something to watch? And you can see that here, Western Oklahoma, Texas Panhandle, maybe even stretching a little bit further south. The ECMWF has that initiating, so not surprised that the SPC going with that enhanced risk. Overnight, that continues to push east into the morning, and then watching. This is 6 a.m. Friday, lunch on Friday, plenty of rainfall moving into the upper Midwest, areas that need it. Snow over the Rockies. And then waiting 6 p.m. now, ECMWF produces probably some sort of like convective elevated thunderstorm here over northern Kansas, potentially with some severe weather, hail, wind. Can't rule out a tornado. But also develops down through the Dallas-Fort Worth area into eastern Oklahoma, kind of east of Oklahoma City. Potential thunderstorm development. It doesn't look like that here because it's just a blob of precipitation, but when you know what kind of moisture is streaming up there, you can kind of see that there, like near Kansas City. A bit more convection overnight, so at least the ECMWF seems to be producing robust convection tomorrow. Again, widespread enhanced risk, pretty wide slight risk. Even beyond that, got to watch for severe weather tomorrow and Friday, even if the ceiling of the event is in question right now with some of that moisture. That persists overnight as we go into Saturday. This is now lunchtime Saturday evening. You can see that severe threat shifting over to southern Texas, maybe over here in the eastern Corn Belt, but rain over a widespread area here, over some geography that needs it, kind of outside even of that severe threat. If I take the forecast a little bit further beyond that, we get a bit quieter this weekend, some showers across the southeast through Sunday and Monday. That continues further on Monday. We have a low developing now over South Dakota. Some snow here over North Dakota, the upper Midwest. We need snow in this area. Eric talked about that. If I play the forecast forward by Tuesday, we have our next low developing somewhere here near Oklahoma, Kansas. Similar situation to what we saw this week, where Tuesday and Wednesday we're kind of bringing that moisture back up into the area ahead of another trough. That brings the rainfall through the Midwest, along the Ohio River Valley through Wednesday, potentially some severe weather. We've been keeping an eye on next Wednesday, kind of in that quarter here for another potential severe weather event. It's a little bit too far out to talk specifics. We're already on, that's like day 6 at this point. And then the Pacific Northwest, some flow coming in there, more momentum ticking up in the atmosphere. There's kind of more to talk about. And through the end of next week, that low tracking to the east and perhaps some snow on the backside of it. We're trending down on temperatures throughout the forecast here. And you'll see that as I take this further out. Another clipper near the end of next week across the upper Midwest, and another snow chance kind of screaming through the Great Lakes region into the northeast. You notice it's getting a little bit drier as I take this forecast out, particularly for like a wide area. Here we're seeing that kind of consistently. If I show you the kind of end of the ECMWF forecast in terms of those precip anomalies, you can kind of see that area that I just highlighted. So let's restart this at the beginning. Obviously wet over the next few days, kind of calming down this weekend. But as I drag this 5-day window into next week, this takes us all the way out through next Saturday. Again, that next trough coming through, very similar presentation to what we saw this week, like Dallas, Fort Worth, up through like Springfield, Illinois, over towards Cincinnati, up through the northeast. Clippers coming through on the northern edge of it, hoping for some nice moisture to get in here, whether in the form of snow or rain. And then I take it all the way out. We're looking like March 14th through the 19th. We start to shift drier and a little bit calmer. Now there's also a temperature swing going out at the same time. Warm right now ahead of that moist flow. Take that forecast out, that next trough next week, bringing in more warm air to a large part of the continental U.S., really almost getting into like summer type temperatures On Tuesday, 70s, maybe 80s. That pushes over to the mid-Atlantic. Cooler on the backside on Thursday. Keeps some warmth lingering even into next weekend. But look at Alberta. There's that next potential cold shot that wants to cut through like the 15th, 16th, and 17th. That would be probably that last big push of winter air, stretching all the way from like Edmonton, Calgary, Bismarck, Sioux Falls. Pushing all the way down toward Atlanta. Before, this is the end of the forecast. I'm not going to put too much weight into this, but this is like a broader concern. I have this here for late spring and summer. Do we go like crazy hot here and just bump the jet stream, split that flow where we get moisture here, moisture way up, too far north in North America, and we're just too hot and dry in between either like the Four Corners or the plains? That, again, I'm not going to put too much weight into this forecast on March 19th. This isn't going to be a big problem at the end of March if it hangs around for a week. But always kind of watching that presentation, given that background, El Niño. The 8 to 14-day temperature outlook, it's warmer there. You can see why. That area started to go over warm. We saw those kind of clippers shoot through, the potential cold air sneaking in through the Midwest, all the way down toward Atlanta. Precipitation-wise, and again, that kind of corridor here started going over drier. They've highlighted more so California, the Southwest for those drier percentages. Keeping that flow across the northern tier of the country near the border, up into the Canadian Prairie, precipitation there. We'll take it, given the mild winter there. And then kind of dropping down into the eastern U.S., so continuing the precip trend in that direction through the long-range forecast. Now, looking beyond that, Eric and I talking last night in the fog, we were trying to figure out where this pattern was going after that, because we have a pretty good handle on the next 14 days, this big shot of precipitation, getting the soil moisture back up ahead of plan, at least for a wide part of the country. And momentum is generally increasing. If we've looked at this the last 6 days, I feel like, and through early April, the general trend is momentum swinging up. A little bit of a drop here in March. I think we saw that kind of more boring weather, so to speak, pick up in that time range. But generally momentum on the upswing. And I think there's this sort of window here in early April, perhaps just by the fact that it's 20, 30 days out in the forecast. It's where we start to lose any material signal, but also it's spring. It's like the middle of the spring window. It's almost right at the date we start thinking about planting. There's just this big question mark. And there's our spring predictability window, if you will, in early April, trying to figure out where this pattern is going. Is momentum going to stay up? Are we going to keep these systems flinging through? Or is the end of the ECMWF forecast, which again, I'm not putting that much weight on, but I don't believe myself anymore. Are we worried about a split flow pattern that sends areas here warm and dry into the heart of summer? So that's where our brains are at right now, trying to figure out, just because we have this El Niño pattern doesn't mean we can't build in some concerns in spring. We've got looking at some analogs where that does materialize. At the moment, they don't look too similar to where we're at here in 2026, but it's just something we're going to piece together over the next few weeks. Wish we had more answers on it right now. What I am excited to look at, though, is the latest ECMWF seasonal forecast has come out. Comes out on the 5th. We'll look at that in a second here. I did want to show the long-range ECMWF extended model. This takes us all the way out kind of near the middle to into April. And again, that trend is pretty clear. Just point an arrow this way, and you've identified the precip trend. So right now it's like here, and it's shifting further to the east in late March, early April. Again, they have to, in this ECMWF forecast, push through that spring predictability window themselves. So I'm not going to put too much weight onto this right now. I think it's been initialized with some drier conditions here. It's obviously been initialized wet in this area, and it's going to kind of hold on to that into the long range. We know that's a common behavior of this model. So not going to put too much weight into this. I think, by about April 1st and beyond, spring has a tendency, El Niño transitions have a tendency to flip the pattern very quickly as you march through spring. So flying a little bit blind, I think, when we get into April. I don't want to put too much weight into this. However, on that same note, I do want to look at the latest ECMWF seasonal forecast, and I'm not even looking at the continental U.S. precip or temperature anomalies, next month or summer. I want to see what it's doing in the Pacific, because what Eric and I have been talking about over the last 2 weeks, everything has looked so El Niño-y. Technically still in a weak La Niña. Again, I expect that to shift to neutral here in a few days. But we're seeing convection in the eastern Pacific. We're seeing these westerly wind bursts in the western Pacific. We're seeing warm water upwell, from like underneath, in the thermocline, the few hundred meters below the ocean. Every sign that you could say points to El Niño is blinking vigorously right now. And the ECMWF of any of the models, like last month in February and January, they've been on the aggressive side developing that El Nino. So they've done a decent job, I think, capturing what we've seen come to fruition here in early March. So now I want to see their latest March forecast. I would expect, given that consistency, for them to just throw up a huge, strong El Nino. And I told Eric last night, if the model comes out tomorrow and it doesn't show that, I'd be shocked. And let's see it. We're watching right here in the Central Pacific. There's that remaining, in quotes, you can't see my air quotes now, La Nina, that fading patch of cold water there. All right, let's go into April. Warming up across the equator. Really warm over here in the Eastern Pacific. Here comes the warmth through May. I mean, that's El Nino. That's not like a developing El Nino. That's an El Nino by May. Strengthens considerably even beyond that, May into June, July. I mean, that is what I expected. There you go. And it just keeps going. It just keeps going. That is a strong El Nino from the ECMWF seasonal. Stronger even than predicted the month before and the month before that. If we look at the plumes here, here's February. It had May, June, and July sniffing El Nino territory. I'm looking like, here's where I'm looking. Here's where we got crop in the ground. All right. Getting up near 1. That's getting toward El Nino territory. It's maybe been declared by then. Let's update those plumes to the latest forecast. I mean, that is rocket launch takeoff. Now, look at like May and June, and just about every model is up here at like 1.2, if not 1.5 by July. I mean, let's draw a line at the end of July, and you got like half the members up over 2. This is what I expected. This is consistency from the model. We're seeing El Nino conditions in the Pacific, and we expected the strong El Nino as a result of that, and at least the ECMWF seasonal model is being consistent with that. Now, another area I'm watching closely is the Northeast Pacific. Eric and I harp on this all the time. This is another quarter that tends to go cooler when we have big drought risk. Yeah, let's say over this area here, the middle part of the country, if not even over into the Midwest. And it's not going cooler. I mean, I just took it out through summer, and there's this little cold patch here near the Aleutians, but otherwise that stays warmer. So I don't really even need to show you the seasonal forecast, right? Because you know what it's going to look like. It's going to look wetter for a lot of these growing regions if we get a super strong El Nino and the Northeast Pacific. But I'll do it anyway. Why not? We have the latest forecast out. June, July, August. I mean, drawing a line from Calgary, Saskatchewan, or Saskatoon, through the Dakotas, Midwest, Mid-Atlantic, down through the soybean belt. I mean, we highlight the areas that we're still concerned about. We've talked about the Southern Plains going over drier. We saw that at the end of the forecast in March. Potentially a heat dome setting up here. That's always a concern. But, when that Northeast Pacific stays warm with that strong El Nino, it's hard to kind of piece out where that drought risk is going to come from. It's probably going to bracket, this quarter here. So something here, maybe more so up into British Columbia. Still concerned about this area just generally, the mild winter, lack of snowpack in this area here. Some of that stretching over to the upper Midwest. Eric kind of talked about the question marks here in his video. I would agree with that. But if that El Nino goes gangbusters and we keep the Northeast Pacific warm, it's not going to be hard to forecast a wetter summer. Now, that's where we're at right now. This model in March performed terribly last year in 2025. So as much confidence as I might sound like I have, it doesn't always work that way. And 2026 could humble us, but it is the signal right now, and at least it's being consistent with that El Nino. Now, temperature-wise, where is the heat concerned? June, July, August? Oh, Pacific Northwest, the Southern Plains. It's kind of question mark area that we're worried about. That's why when I saw the end of the, the March forecast where we went over super hot here, I went, I hope I don't see that in June. I hope I don't see that in July or August, because we have quite a bit of wildfires over in the western U.S. given the lack of snowpack there. All right, I think that's my last slide today. Let's pull that precip back. Just kind of want to see it. April, May, and June. Not surprised to see this area is initialized wet in the model. The seasonal model has the same issues that the extended one does. This area kind of initialized dry, so not surprised to see April, May, and June wet through this quarter here. Again, I think, even though I'm pulling this up and looking at it, this is that spring predictability window. We're still kind of worried about that split flow coming across like this. That could keep this area on the drier side. It would not shock me, if before El Nino takes over, if some of that dryness starts to peel closer in to the central U.S. with a split flow regime if it sets up. So Again, not putting much weight on these spring forecasts right now. Let's get to April, reassess. Let's see where those ocean temperatures are in the Northeast Pacific. Usually by those big concerning years, by April or May, we started to see more significant shifts in the Northeast Pacific by those dates. That puts us about 3 weeks away, and we'll be here to talk you through that. Thanks for watching.